What are some ways that you guide people that perhaps you work with, brands you help? How do you guide them on what topic to pick for original research?
The thing I think it all comes back to, and I don't mean for this to sound, it's just kind of trite, but it all comes back to goals. So are you doing your research to be a thought leader in the space? Or are you doing it to get backlinks? Or are you doing it to get leads? Or are you doing it to get media mentions? Because the type of goal that you have, and we also have people who say, yeah, let's do everything. Well, you really need to pick what your primary goal is.
Hello and welcome to the Right Podcast. I'm your host, Julie McCoy. Join me as I interview experts in the field and discuss hot content, copywriting, and marketing topics. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to episode 43 in the Right Podcast. Today, I have the amazing Michele Linn as my guest on the podcast. She was one of the first employees and the former head of editorial at Content Marketing Institute. She's written hundreds of articles, spoken at industry events, and she's been named in the top women in media. Michele has appeared as a guest speaker in my content strategy and marketing course, and today she's the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Mantis Research. Thank you so much for coming on my show, Michele.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia.
Well, I'm really excited to talk about our topic today. I think it's a really good one for today, going into the new year. We're going to talk about original research and how and why it's really a win and a great opportunity for marketers and brands today. So to start, could you walk us through just the basic meaning of original research? When we hear this as marketers, what does that truly mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we are talking about original research, we are talking about any time that you can use data to tell a story in a new way. So this might be anything from, developing surveys to find net new data on a topic. It could be doing qualitative interviews with people. It could even be looking at your own data and drawing insights from those. Or even could be looking at existing data like U.S. Census data or there's tons of different license data out there and taking a look at that and presenting the data in a way that helps a topic come to light for your particular audience.
So what are some examples of original research really done well, have kind of risen to the top? And, definitely feel free to pull from your own client success stories at Mantis Research. That's what you do, correct, at Mantis Research?
Yes. So we are completely focused on helping marketers create and publish and amplify their own original research. And as a quick note, I should have mentioned this from the outset. We actually hear a lot of times people talk about market research. And we use the term original research just to differentiate because everything that the research that we do is research that is published out to help marketers, get media mentions and backlinks and be a thought leader and get leads and subscribers and so forth. So it's not research for internal purposes. It can be used for that, of course, but that's not its primary intent. All of that said, so when we're looking at examples, all of these examples are publicly out there. I come across research examples all the time, and there's a lot of good ones for a lot of different reasons. Like you mentioned, Julia, I came from CMI, where I worked from 2010 through last summer. And one of the things that we did, and one of the things that our founder, Joe Polizzi, did from the very start in 2010 is that he partnered with marketing profs to create our annual research. And this is something that we have repeated on an annual basis. The research is led by a wonderful, wonderful research director, Lisa Merton-Beets. But very long story short, it was really an insight into the content marketing industry from 2010 through today. And having those year-over-year trends have been so valuable to the industry, and it really helped us build CMI. So it was, wow. It's, if you look at the number of backlinks that our content gets on CMI, our research posts, including our annual research as well as other pieces, those take 4 of the top 10 spots.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is. And actually, Julia, when I last looked, one of your articles that you wrote about that when you curated stats around the content marketing industry, that was like, I think our top two number posts in terms of number of links.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
that's really cool.
I looked at these numbers a little bit ago, but so it's just a wonderful example of researchers' work time and time again for CMI. But
yes.
And a couple of other quick examples. If you're looking for something different, Linn EDU has a wonderful research library to study. They publish research on a monthly basis. They do a mix of polls, and they also analyze data. A lot of their stuff gets really great media coverage because they cover really timely topics like Bitcoin and Amazon. Or if you're looking for an example of a larger benchmark study, PwC has a wonderful CEO study that they've done for the last 20 plus years. That's a great example to study just because of the way that they take that data and they repurpose it in so many different ways.
Going back to that CMI report, I think, I got my start back in 2011, but I really learned about content marketing in, I would say, 2012, 13. And as soon as I learned about it, I'm pretty sure I came across that report and CMI like within all the same week. And that report I now read the minute it comes out. I am such a nerd. So I can testify to how important those research reports are. And then, from that stems so much conversation in the industry, which is so cool. Like, oh, wow, this findings shocked us that, content strategy is now, for example, becoming really important. And it wasn't 2 years ago. So the conversations that original research can spark in the industry is also really cool.
You're so right. And it's funny because I talk to a lot of marketers, not surprisingly, but so many people I mentioned the CMI research and I'm like, yeah, it seems like it's one of those things that many people know about and they can associate with, which is a really, really cool thing.
Yes, definitely. Well, yeah, there's something that we created this year and it was an original research report. And it's kind of in the topic area where a lot of people question or they tend to not trust this. It's a top 100 list of people in content marketing. And what we did to curate this list is we did use software. We used BuzzSumo. We used a couple other ones. But whenever we generated the list, we also really took a human look at everyone. Are they tweeting, writing, speaking about the industry, in the last 30 days? Like it can't be trends, things change so quickly. So we really looked for real people who had that real-time expertise. And that list later on got so many links and it became our top link to post for the whole year. It still is. So what are your thoughts on those types of lists, which have gotten some bad rap in the industry? Like there's so many of them, and a lot of them are generated just by software. But what are your thoughts on doing top 100 lists?
I think it can be a really effective way to take a look at the industry, especially if you have some rigor behind it. I like that you guys have both that, that data-driven analytical approach. It's not just you picking your favorite people or picking the people who you and I see on these lists time and time again. But I also think that, I remember back in the day, I know before CMI was jumped to 42, and they did a similar list where they looked at content marketing blogs, and you could apply, if I remember correctly, because I was on a different blog back then, and they built Jumped to 42. Was one of the factors that helped them build Jumped to 42 was recreating this list of these content marketing blogs that it was kind of like they had an analytical perspective to the list. It also had a human perspective to the list, I believe. And it's really, really helpful. So I'm a big proponent of things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So another question going into original research, and there's so much work involved, like thinking of the piece that we did, and I'm sure you have many stories in what you do every day, but there's so much work involved in putting together something that's really going to stand out. So considering all the resources necessary, time, investment, etc., why should marketers prioritize original research? Like what are some of the benefits?
So just like you and I were talking about right before you hit record, Julia, I feel like things today, at least from a marketing perspective, are getting so much harder. Blogging now, like starting a blog now is so different than starting a blog 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Doing podcasting is it's a lot more difficult to break through now than it was previously. So when we look at the content marketing space right here, right now, I mean, there's a lot of research I can point to that looks at how research as a content form is a really effective way to generate backlinks and to generate shares and to generate leads and to generate those conversations that are new and different and meaningful. So it's one of those things, and I'm happy to share some data if you need, but it's just it works right here, right now in 2018.
Love that. I think there's a risk of, they call it the industry, the acronym for it is FOMO, fear of missing out. And that's the reason people jump on maybe doing Instagram stories. Now there's IGTV, on. And there's, so many platforms you could be on. Platforms come and go, like Google Plus died this year. That was crazy. And so, there's so many things we could be doing, but it's more about what should we be doing? What's really going to benefit our audience and grow our brand awareness? And just like you said, I feel like original research is such an opportunity to do that because you're creating something that is really going to give people insights in the industry, what people are up to, which is like really cool, especially as we all get more familiar with technology, the internet. Everyone is on the internet now. So we know what original research looks like.
It is. And I think the other thing about research that works really well, I mean, I think a lot of people think about research in a very, in a written format, like a really detailed blog post, like Andy Crestodina does for his annual blogger study, or a more formal PDF results. But when you have that data, there is the opportunity to take it and use it in any channel that your company and that your brand is actually in. It translates into so many different things. So it's not going to go out of style as the trends come and go. People are always looking for data-backed facts, that tell a really compelling story. That's never going to go out of style.
Love the way you put that. That's so true. So moving on to a couple last questions here. Whenever brands are thinking about, okay, what should we put together? Original research is now on our scope. What kind of topics should we go into? What are some ways that you guide people that perhaps you work with, brands you help? How do you guide them on like what topic to pick for original research?
It's a great question. It's one we get a lot. And there are a lot of things that go into the, thinking about which topic makes the most sense. And it's one of those things that you have to, take a step back and give it some consideration. But the thing I think it all comes back to, and I don't mean for this to sound, it's just kind of trite, but it all comes back to goals. So are you doing your research to be a thought leader in the space? Or are you doing it to get backlinks? Or are you doing it to get leads? Or are you doing it to get media mentions? Because the type of goal that you have, and we also have people who say, yeah, let's do everything. Well, you really need to pick what your primary goal is. Because, for instance, if your goal is to get media mentions, you might be much better off doing these like short polls kind of like Linn EDU does, that are faster, they're very timely, they're very punchy, that have a much better probability of getting media pickup. And then you want to put your time and your energy into the media and to the PR planning. But if your goal is to get leads and to be a thought leader in the industry, it can make a lot of sense to do a benchmark report, like the example from CMI. Our goal back in 2010 was to build ourselves as an authority and a leader in the content marketing space. So we knew we wanted to do this study, and we knew we wanted to do it every single year. And we knew that we wanted to make this research the backbone of our editorial. So we could talk about, all of these different topics in a lot of different ways. So it really comes down to what your primary goal is, and that's going to help you figure out the type of research you want to do, the topic for your research. It's going to help you prioritize how you amplify your research and so forth. So it seems like a really simple questions, but there really are these real ramifications and implications of how your project's going to look based on what your goals are.
That is great. I love that that's where you recommend starting is what are your goals? And like you said, it's so simple, but it's such an important question. for the first 3 years of doing content, I don't think I was asking myself that whenever I created content. And whenever I started going by that question and then kind of putting ideas that didn't fit goals into like a draft pile or even a trash pile, that's when we started seeing a lot more ROI on our content. Mapping it to goals is so important.
It's so important. We have, like I said, I have some people I talk to who say, yeah, let's make it, let's get it picked up by the media and let's make it, be a cornerstone of our editorial and let's do this, this, and this. Chances are you can't do all of those things with one piece of research.
Right. It's just like any other content format. You can't hit all those boxes. You're going to have to create more than one piece.
Exactly. And make it really specific for that goal and for that audience.
Yes, specific content is so important. So true. So how long do you usually recommend taking, or according to probably industry type of brand, how long does it take on average to create an original research study from start to finish? Is it like 3 months? Is it 2 months?
So not to beg the question, but a lot of it's going to depend on what type of research that you're putting together. If you decide that you want to do these short polls, those are obviously much faster. And if you plan these polls out in a series, you can do one strategy and have your editorial calendar for your research, similar to how you and I would build an editorial calendar for blog posts. If you're doing a larger benchmarking study, I would say plan at minimum 3 months. It could likely be closer to 5 months just because of the realities of how fast some companies can work and other priorities and so forth. So it all depends. And it also depends, if you're doing a big study, how you're going to get respondents. If you are trying to get, or if you're trying to get respondents in an organic way, like you're doing a lot of outreach and emails and so forth, I typically recommend that people keep their survey open for about 4 weeks. But if you use a panel, we have a client right now that we're using a panel with, it's a consumer-based survey, and they can fill that panel within one business day. So that's a huge. So if you have budget and you're more time restrained, there's certainly ways to make it work too.
Interesting. So going back to those polls, which are on a smaller basis than like a bigger study, what is the benefit there, and how is that typically used whenever you work with people that do that? I
would more typically recommend doing polls if you're looking to get media mentions. I think it can certainly work for thought leadership too, or to get some subscribers if you're publishing something on a consistent basis. But these polls work really well because you can choose a topic that aligns with your brand. You can choose a topic that hasn't been covered, and something that's really interesting to the press and or to your audience, and really, do something at a relatively quick pace to get some interesting data.
Interesting. So the last question I have for you, just to wrap up this awesome topic, how can brands, marketers best promote and get that traction back to their original research studies? Are there any specific routes you recommend or things you do?
Yeah, I love that question, because a lot of marketers we talk to, if they're doing research, they oftentimes have plans on how to do the research, but they don't necessarily have plans on how to get more out of that investment and out of that time spent. So we are huge proponents of amplifying the research that you do have and being really smart about it. And I think it's really key with, larger studies that you want to repeat on an ongoing basis, because then you kind of have that momentum built up. But the way that you want to promote your research is, again, it's going to come down to what your goals are. We all can't do everything. So like if your goal is thought leadership, you might want to prioritize doing byline articles on other people's websites, or you might want to prioritize doing things like industry presentations or webinars, or sharing the data within social media. But again, if your plan is to get media mentions or to get backlinks, you're going to be better served by having a more formal PR plan, or having an influencer outreach plan, or you know what I mean? So it's going to depend on what those goals are. if your goals are leads and subscribers, think about those things that generate leads and subscribers. Webinars are wonderful for doing that. Some people create these online, these online assessments where they can answer some questions, from the survey, and then you can get these customized results back per person. That's another great way to generate leads for your particular research. And the last thing I would recommend is that think about what that next step is going to be once someone reads that research. It doesn't make sense to create, I call it a related gated piece of content, but let's say your research identifies this huge gap. So for instance, the CMI research for years has said, people who have a content marketing strategy are more effective or successful than those who don't. So we create this guide on how to create a content marketing strategy. So figure out what that gap is, and then create content to help people address the gap that you identified in your research. And that's a great way to amplify the research and then to get those leads and subscribers and so forth.
That is awesome. Well, I can testify to exactly what you said. I love hearing that, because after reading the CMI report, that generated some of my book ideas and some of my course ideas. I'm like, there's a gap in the industry. Yes. So as you're talking, I'm like, oh, light bulb. I have done that.
It does. It actually works.
It does. Oh man, it really does. I love when you can, identify that gap, point to that original research study where it is, black and white, and then show your audience, oh, I've created something to fill that gap. That is the best. And it's so much easier to get that traction on whatever you're producing, whether it's a free ebook or a paid course. You're going to get so much more traction if you can point to a need and then create it from, a real place of expertise. You don't just want to create something to make money and get leads. You need to add value, but that is a great way to do it.
Yes. And it helps your brand tell a really cohesive story, which is nice. So you don't feel like you have this, disconnected pile of content assets.
Yes.
You can tie it back to your research. It just feels better and it flows better.
So true. So true. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Right Podcast, Michele. This was really useful. All your advice on this topic, and love what you're doing in the industry.
Thank you, Julia. This was so much fun.
Where can we find you? Michele Linn on Twitter?
Yep. I'm at Michele Linn with one L on Twitter. Michele with one L. I'm on LinkedIn, and then our website is mantisresearch.com.
Awesome. Definitely go follow Michele. And thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Julia. Have a good one.
How crazy is it that 2019 is around the corner? It's just blowing my mind how quickly this year came to an end. If you're a freelancer, entrepreneur, you work in an agency setting, you might find some value from my 2 training courses. I have one course out that's super intensive that teaches every single step on content strategy. That course is called the Content Strategy and Marketing Course. It's a 6-week training program, kind of like a boot camp, to take you all the way from zero to hero in content marketing. You can check it out at contentstrategycourse.com. And just in time for the new year, I relaunched my writing course, the Expert SEO Content Writer. This course is a 1-week intensive course. That's right, you can literally finish it inside 1 week. That teaches you every step involved in profitable SEO content writing. Learn more about it and enroll at SEOwritingcourse.com. And if you enjoy the Right Podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button in iTunes. I look forward to having you back here for my next episode.